I did not cry when he told me I had to leave. That detail surprises people when they hear the story later, as if tears are the expected proof of devastation. But by the time the divorce papers were finalized, something quieter had already happened. The loud part, arguments, accusations, slammed doors, had burned itself out months before. What remained was administrative, clinical. Signatures, dates, transfers. Even being asked to move out felt procedural. We sat at the kitchen table like two professionals concluding a contract. He explained finances with the same voice he once used to discuss grocery budgets. Practical, reasonable, faintly impatient. The accounts were in his name. The apartment lease was his. The savings had been managed centrally, a phrase that sounded efficient until it wasn't. I nodded. I packed. I scheduled movers. Humiliation, I discovered, rarely arrives as drama. It comes as logistics. Boxes filled the bedroom in neat stacks. I wrapped dishes in old newspapers, pausing occasionally when an object refused to feel neutral. The ceramic bowl we bought on vacation, the lamp we argued about because he said it was unnecessary. Memory clung to things like static, but even that faded under exhaustion. What unsettled me most was not losing the marriage. It was the strange sensation of becoming unofficial, as if my life had been quietly co-signed and someone had now withdrawn approval. In the weeks that followed, I moved through borrowed spaces, a friend's couch, a short-term rental. Conversations conducted in careful tones, everyone politely avoiding the obvious arithmetic of my situation. I had a degree, experience, skills, yet none of that seemed immediately convertible into stability. Years of shared decision-making had left me oddly hesitant, as though autonomy required retraining. Somewhere during this drifting period, I remembered the card. My father had given it to me years ago. No ceremony, no dramatic speech. Just a small envelope handed across a cafe table. For emergencies, he'd said. I had laughed at the time. Not dismissively, but with the comfortable arrogance of someone who believed emergencies belonged to other people. The card went into a drawer, where it remained, less financial instrument than sentimental relic. My father had always been cautious, inclined toward contingency planning. I loved him for it, gently mocked him for it, and assumed I would never truly need it. Until I did. The bank branch was smaller than I expected. Neutral decor, muted lighting, the familiar atmosphere of institutional calm. I stood in line rehearsing quiet disappointment. At best, I imagined, there might be enough for a few months' rent. A temporary cushion. Nothing transformative. When my turn came, I slid the card across the counter. The young banker greeted me with professional politeness. She typed, paused, typed again. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, not shock, not confusion, but concentration thickening into something else. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Could you wait one moment?" She disappeared behind a glass partition. I stood there, oddly detached, watching reflections move across polished surfaces. A man at another desk discussed loan terms. A printer hummed. Everything retained its ordinary rhythm, which made the banker's absence feel faintly theatrical, though I could not have said why. When she returned, she was accompanied by an older man in a dark suit. His posture carried authority the way some people carry height, naturally, without emphasis. He addressed me directly, his tone measured but urgent. "Mom, would you mind coming with us?" Not alarmed, not aggressive, but unmistakably serious. Inside the small office, the air felt different. Denser. The older banker sat across from me, the young woman standing quietly near the door. "There appears to be an irregularity," he began, choosing his words with care. My stomach tightened. A mistake, I assumed. A clerical error. Perhaps the account had been closed, misfiled, misremembered. He turned the monitor toward me. Numbers filled the screen. For a moment, they did not register as meaning. Just abstract figures, rows of digits divorced from comprehension. My brain performed its habitual minimization. Surely this is wrong. Surely I'm misreading this. "I believe," he said gently, "your father established a long-term trust structure. Words that rearranged the entire landscape of my past in an instant. My father's caution. His quiet insistence on financial independence. The advice I half listened to, assuming it belonged to a generation defined by different anxieties. What I had interpreted as worry now revealed itself as design. The amount was not fantastical, but it was undeniable, enough to stabilize, enough to decide, enough to make dependency no longer inevitable. I remember nodding as the banker explained details, legal frameworks, access procedures, documentation requirements. My shock was curiously subdued, unfolding as a slow internal recalibration rather than explosion, relief braided with something more complicated. Gratitude, grief, a faint, uncomfortable guilt at how thoroughly I had underestimated the man who raised me. Walking out of the bank, the city looked unchanged, yet everything felt structurally different. Money, I realized, was not the story. Leverage was. Not power over others, but power over circumstances. In the months that followed, my life did not transform dramatically. There were no confrontations, no cinematic reversals. My ex-husband received no grand revelation scene. The world did not pause to acknowledge my altered status. What changed was quieter. I signed a lease without negotiation anxiety. I declined compromises I would once have accepted automatically. I re-entered professional spaces not as someone scrambling for rescue, but as someone making choices. Dignity, it turns out, often returns in administrative form. Documents, decisions, boundaries. My father never lived to see any of it. But sometimes, when reviewing financial statements or making long, delayed plans, I hear his voice, not sentimental, not ghostly, simply practical as ever. For emergencies, he had been right about something neither of us could fully articulate at the time. Emergencies are rarely sudden disasters. More often, they are slow erosions of self you do not notice until stability disappears. What he left me was not wealth. It was margin. And within that margin, something unexpected took shape, not triumph, not revenge, just the unfamiliar, steady sensation of standing on ground that no longer shifted beneath my feet.